Grief is a kind of prayer, not the kind you say with hands folded and eyes raised. Grief prays from the pit of the stomach, with no thought of who might be listening. It begs, it bargains, it howls into the dark, and if the dark howls back, most never notice the difference. I've seen mothers light candles to saints they never believed in, and fathers who promised their souls to the wind if it would only bring their children home. Some speak those words in madness, others in love. Makes no difference. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. That's what the righteous say. But not everyone can live with such acceptance. Some need a voice, any voice, to answer back. 1765. Patrusesti, Father and Son. A tale from the Book of Silas Crowe. The wind had teeth that late afternoon, a slow, grinding cold. It settled into the joints, whispering to the blood that maybe it's time to lay down. I'd crossed 2 ridges that day, the Carpathians jutting behind me like a row of ancient knuckles curling toward the sky. Stark hills rolled beneath them, bare, hard-bitten things. The trees had thinned to bone-gray trunks, and the snow covered their roots. Wallachia, in 1765, had always struck me as a land of hush. It didn't scream, didn't plead, but it endured. Even the rivers were quiet, dragging their bellies across the rocks like wounded things. Even the crows flew low, as if the leaden sky were pressing them down. Raven flew alone below them, always ahead of me, a black sliver against the dimming sky. He circled once, then dipped low toward a shallow valley hemmed in by crooked fences and dead brush. I followed. Like Wallachia, you won't find Patrusesti on the map. Not anymore. It was never more than an inn and a few stubborn huts and tents, clinging to the base of a narrow pass like lichen on old stone. The hills here loomed like tombstones of mighty giants long dead, their flanks scattered with frostbitten pine and shale that groaned beneath the weight of shrill Carpathian wind. You could see where the road once mattered, broken milestones and wagon groves now choked with snow. But trade had moved elsewhere, leaving Patrusesti behind to rot or to remember. It chose both. Stirring dark shapes, half lit by torches, drew my gaze toward a graveyard on a lonely hill where the wind keened like a wailing widow. I counted a dozen men, maybe more. One of them was digging, each strike slow and stubborn. The ground must have fought him for every inch. I watched a moment longer before turning toward the inn. A local girl, no more than 20, wrapped in a patchwork shawl with the ends pinned tight at her throat, was sweeping the steps. Her hair was dark, the color of old bark after rain, tied back in a loose braid, with strands stinging her face in the wind. Her skin bore the ruddy touch of cold, her cheeks raw and wind-bitten. Her eyes were golden brown, like honey watered down to the edge of amber. Tired, watchful. "Evening," I said. She glanced from her chore, saying nothing. "What's all that on the hill?" "A dreadful thing," she said. "Not even a week dead, and they just won't let him rest. Poor Mihai." She pointed at the scene. "The one digging is Mihai's father, Vasile, my uncle." "And the others?" I asked. "They are from Kikanesh yonder." She pointed past the valley's edge, toward a cut in the hills where the trees grew thicker. "Came this afternoon with hatchets and hayforks and scythes, as if we're hiding a criminal. Said they'd dig him up themselves if Vasile wouldn't do it. It's bad luck to do such a thing before the souls had time to leave." Superstitions, but I had not the heart to argue. Instead, I asked, "Why?" She lowered her eyes to the broom in her hands, then back toward the hill. "Animals started turning up wrong," she said. "Lamb bled dry in the stable. but no tracks in the snow. Then a child down the road said Mihai was standing at her window, smiling. People laughed it off until someone else said they heard humming near the well, a song only the lad knew. Little crow, where do you fly when the cold winds blow? Or something like that. Mihai had a thing for the crows. Raven gave a low click from the paws above us, preening. It always hated the crows, considering them raucous cowards, too afraid to fly solo. Their likeness was like an insult to him. The girl looked at him and back at me. Now they say the grave looked wrong, that the earth refused to settle. The stew was thick, salty, and sour from the cabbage boiled too long. Shreds of pork floated in the broth alongside limb roots, parsnip, maybe turnip. Mira, the young girl, had brought it with a heavy slice of dark bread and a thin cup of plum brandy that burned the cold straight out of my chest. I leaned back, satisfied, and looked about the inn. The common room was low-ceilinged and narrow, built more to trap heat than to welcome gases. A single oil lantern flickered near the counter. A kettle hissed over the coals. The scent of smoke, sweat, and fermented wood lingered in the beams. Two men played the silent game of dice in the corner. Their shoulders hunched and their heads hung low. Another sat alone, nursing something in a cracked clay cup, eyes never leaving the window. No one laughed. No one spoke above a murmur. The door creaked open behind me, letting in a gush of cold and a man shaped by it. He stepped through, boots caked in frost and mud, his coat dusted white from the hill. Sweat had slicked his color, and his breath came hard through cracked lips. Mira was at his side in an instant. "Uncle." He raised a hand. "Don't. I'm filthy." Brushing past her, he left a wet trail where the snow on him began to melt. He said something else, too low to catch. Mira's face tightened, and she didn't follow. Vasile disappeared through a door behind the counter, one I assumed led to the back quarters. Tap, tap, tap. I turned to my left and saw Raven on the windowsill outside, peering in with one cold, dark eye. He tapped the glass again, impatient. I raised a reluctant hand. Mira heeded the call. "Is he coming back out?" I asked. "Later, perhaps?" Mira answered. "After dark?" "He's resting now." "Why?" "I'd like to talk with him." The stew was long gone when Vasile emerged from the back at dusk. I moved to the counter, finishing a plate of roasted potatoes and salted sheep's cheese, washed down with a mug of something warm and sharp. Apple and honey spirit, most likely, distilled strong enough to make a mule confess. A clean shirt hung loose over his frame, collar open, sleeves rolled to the elbows. Aside from that, he didn't look much better than when he came in. His hair was damp, plastered to his forehead in streaks of gray and black. His face was sharp, leathery, and weathered. The eyes were worse. Flat, dull things, yellowed with smoke and long nights. Restless. He moved behind the counter in a daze, a tired man too weary to stop working. He wiped down the counter with a damp rag, adjusted the oil lamp, and checked the kettle. He scooped a few coals into the hearth from a brass pan and tested the warmth of the stew pot. Mira passed behind him with a tray, delivering plates to a few patrons sitting far apart. She went back to return the tray, eyed me once, and went out. I let the silence hold a moment, then rubbed my knuckles lightly on the wood. Vasile looked up. "Something to drink, please," I said. "Whatever's still on us." He nodded once and reached for a clay bottle tucked beneath the counter. He poured a measure into my empty mug. Dark wine, probably mulberry or sour plum. Local and bitter, watered down. I took a slow sip. The wine hit the back of my throat like an old insult. A nasty business that was, I said. A father forced to dig up his own. Vasile didn't answer at first. He wrenched out the clay ladle, set it aside, and leaned his hands flat on the counter as if he had no strength to support his own weight. He flicked his gaze at Mira through the window. What have you heard? A foul rumor, I said, about the dead walking. Oh, Mira. He sighed, pulled a cloth from beneath the counter, and started drying a stack of bowls, though his hands didn't seem to know what they were doing. Back during the famine of 43, he said, maybe 44, people started digging up graves, blaming the dead for spreading the sickness. They said some bodies didn't rot like they should, claimed they looked asleep, said it meant the soul hadn't gone where it should. He shook his head. Hunger does strange things to people, makes monsters, if not out of the dead, then out of the ones still breathing. An old superstition is all. And now? I asked. He paused. Now, it's just fear with a new face. A sick lamb, a shadow at the window. No priest to say otherwise. So, they come with torches and start asking what can't be answered. The reason Dad got blamed. His jaw clenched. My son. What did they discover? Vasily nodded. They are satisfied, for now. Mihai's face was gray enough, his lips sunken, skin pulling at the bones, just like it should be. He stared at the mug in my hand, took another, and poured for himself. He drank like a man trying to drown a thought before it spoke. They watched closely, he said, looking for signs. Fresh blood at the mouth, nails still pink, skin too smooth. And no, he's dead. Just dead. He said it like a man still trying to believe it. An awkward smile surfaced. He glanced at me and chuckled. Odd. I've seen grief wear 1,000 masks, but this one didn't fit the shape of mourning. It sat wrong, like a borrowed coat worn backward. Vasile finished the rest of his drink. His hand trembled, just once, and he set the mug down too carefully, as if anxious of my scrutiny. They won't come back now, he muttered, almost to himself. They saw what they needed to see. I caught a somber smile. He wore a mask, not to hold back tears, but a secret, a long one, heavy. His mouth was still, but his eyes moved. Not the gaze of someone remembering, but someone watching to see if he'd been found out. You've been hitting a room, traveler, he said abruptly. I gazed at the pale moon through the window, looking for my companion. Raven had flown off again, probably foraging for scraps. I usually shared what I could, but a bird had a habit of disappearing when it suited him, and sulking when the plate was clean. Wanderer, I tipped my head. A warm bed would be nice. Vasile nodded once, wiped his hands on the cloth again, and turned to take an iron key from the wall hook behind him. Up the stairs, second on the right. Door sticks a little, so lean into it. I took the key from his damp hand before he wiped it again. Fresh sweat beaded his brow despite the cold draft creeping through the boards. I woke to a sound no dream could make. A high, shivering note broke into a full scream. It dragged me up like a hook in the spine. A girl's voice, raw. When I arrived downstairs, the fire was still going. Concerned faces looked up at me, eyes still puffy with sleep. At the center, Mira stood, pale and shaking, hands clutching her shawl tight, as if it were the only thing holding her together. I saw him, she whispered, but the silence was too deep to carry her voice. She swallowed hard, then louder. I saw Mihai, leering through the window. I couldn't move. Not until he knocked like he wanted to be let in. A ripple passed through the room. denials and affirmations. "You're tired, girl," said a woman near the hearth. "The mind plays tricks at this ungodly hour." A few nodded. "No!" Her scream was shrill. "His face was wrong, like a mask of death. Complete darkness filled his beady eyes. Every surface of his skin was white except his lips. They were blood red. But I know it's him. It can't be anyone else, just like what the villagers saw." I winch. Not a smart thing to say. But then again, fear turned people dull. "Then we must search for him," barked a man with a thick beard near the window. "Where's Vasile when we need him? Is he still asleep?" The door creaked open, and Vasile stepped inside, breath steaming from the cold. Rugged, as if he had walked a mile. Heads turned, and the man with the beard stepped forward. "Where have you been?" he asked. Vasile looked around the room and shrugged. "Out back, needed to relieve myself." He went and hung his wet coat by the hearth. "Why is everybody up?" Mira looked at him, eyes still wide, but she said nothing. The wind had grown meaner, peeling through my coat. The sky was low, bruised with stars, and the moon hung limp behind a gauze of cloud. The hour belonged to the dead, the sinners, and their masters. I reached the edge of the inn's yard and followed the sloping trail up. Raven was waiting near the fence line, perched on one of the rotted crosses. His feathers puffed against the cold. He gave a short, angry croak the moment he saw me. Then another. Then another. "I'm going," I said. "Quit your yapping." Raven had been calling me when the weary folk surged around the inn with their cruel tools and callous gestures. He must have seen something I didn't. I looked back at the torches down there, spreading across the valley. In another direction, dim lights flickered to life. Chisenest was waking up. Mihai, or whatever it was, must have done mischief again. Things weren't looking good for Vasile. When he entered the inn, I noticed the dirt clinging to his hand. His boots had been too wet for a dry path to the latrine. Stale odor clung to his coat, the dampness of sweat and soil. He was lying about where he had been. The graveyard lay quiet. The wind didn't pass through here. It circled, stalled. When I stepped past the gate, Raven croaked again, higher this time. His wings flared once, then settled. "I don't have wings like you," I drawled, "and this isn't exactly the time for a hike." Raven eyed me with his shrewd, beady eyes. He was judging me. I wiped the frost from my spectacles and surveyed the graveyard. The snow had settled clean over most of the graves, smooth, undisturbed, tucked in like sleeping things, except one at the edge. It bore no such stillness. The snow was uneven, the edges sunken, like the earth had been shuffled and patted down again, not once, but many times. Clumsy, recent. I stepped closer. Beneath the crusted frost, footprints ringed the grave. Some melted halfway, some fresh enough to still show trap. One had a deep heel gouge, the kind left when a man digs with all his weight. The soil around the headstone was dark and wet, not frozen like it should be at this hour. Raven gave another croak, perhaps say, "Get it yet?" I nodded and knelt near the tombstone. Mihai, my beloved son. There was no blessing, no verse, just love, carved with a shaking hand. Something glinted at the foot of the tombstone. I brushed the snow away. A thin wire ran from the earth, taut and narrow, half buried under turned snow. My hand followed it to a rusted loop, and there, just beyond the stone, I found a bell. No bigger than a clenched fist, mounted on a crooked iron rod. I stood and met Raven's gaze. Most use a bell to prevent a premature burial. I said. Someone uses this to know if the deceased is ready to walk. Raven croaked in agreement. A strigoi, I concluded. A commotion drew my gaze down the hill. A slow procession of torchlight moved through the narrow pass. Weapons glinted. Drawn, shadowed faces carried the same grim purpose. Men from Chichen-Nest, some women too, clutching sticks and holy things. Mira tried to hold them back, arms wide, shouting something lost to the wind. Vasile stood at the inn's door, his coat still damp, his eyes fixed on the road like he'd been expecting it. I looked at the stars. The witching hour is almost over. The wind carried gasps and shrill screams. From the corner of the inn, slow and upward, a figure emerged, running toward Vasile with outstretched arms. The light showed a lad caught between worlds. His skin was sickly gray, his eyes wide and searching. All the color had left him except for the red on his hands and mouth. You might think Vasile was done for, but instead of fleeing, he caught his undead son in a tight embrace. The villagers froze, just for a second, before panic broke loose. Fingers pointed, shouts and screams merged. The mob raised their torches, brandishing weapons. Someone threw a stone. Mira screamed. Vasile turned to them, shielding Mihai from the stones. His face contorted, not with fear, but with defiance. The man had gone mad with grief. He pulled Mihai inside and slammed the door. Raven flew and I ran down the hill, slipping, sliding. From afar, I saw the first torch strike the side of the inn. Another lit the door. Someone shattered a window. Mira ran toward the inn, but a man caught her and wouldn't let go. By the time I reached the bottom of the hill, the flames had begun to lick the roof. Hungry, purposeful. Vasile! They called. Come out! Abandon the dead and leave! Vasile didn't answer them with words, but with an agonizing scream as fire roared through the window, licking the cold air. The wind blew the flame inward, and I caught a glimpse of father and son curling together on the floor, ablaze. Raven landed on my shoulder, and I faced the mob. Some wept, others watched in silent regret. A few, a dangerous few, stood in prideful relief. People say the dead must rest, as if they care, but more often, it's the living who demand it, for their own sake. Dawn broke over what was left of Patrusesti. A long sigh of light crept over the snow, turning the frost to gold around the blackened ruins. The inn was gone. Nothing left but 2 scorched beams and a stone hearth. Smoke coiled in lazy ribbons toward the pale sky. The mob had dispersed, leaving behind scattered footprints and broken torches. Only a few remained. An old man, a friend of Vasile, a woman comforting the deceased niece, and Mira herself, shoulders shaking beneath her coat, standing where the door once stood. She didn't cry, not out loud. Grief like hers didn't need to howl anymore. I approached. Raven rode my shoulder, quiet now. Mira, I said. She turned to me, eyes hollow with sorrow. I'm sorry, I said. Vasile was wrong, but he wasn't a bad man. He just loved too much. I turned to Raven. Attachment can lead to this. I wasn't sure if she listened, but she nodded. I reached into my coat, pulled out a handkerchief, and placed it in her hands. Will the dead rest now? She asked. They might, I said, as long as the living stop calling them back. It's my fault, isn't it? She turned to me. If only I had kept silent. I shook my head. It's written. Nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. It's only a matter of time, Mira. She lowered her gaze, holding the handkerchief to her heart. I stood with her a moment longer, listening to her whispered prayer. We made the sign of the cross, and I said my farewell. I turned to the hill where the graveyard had grown over the years, like moss over the forgotten. The light was rising, chasing the stars back into hiding. Raven gave one short croak and flared his wings. Grief is a kind of prayer. Yes, sometimes, with time, it heals. But some just refuse to let go, clinging to a memory. It can drive a father to kneel in the dirt night after night, faking rot on the face of his son, just to delay goodbye. As we took the road, I concluded our adventure with a verse from the Proverbs. There is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the Book of Silas Crowe. Until next time.